Welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today is Tuesday, June 24th, day 627 of the war. Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our diplomatic reporter, Lazar Berman. Lazar, thanks for joining me on this news-packed episode.
Good to be here.
Is the Israel-Iran war over or not? That is the question after U.S. President Donald Trump announced a bilateral ceasefire overnight. And there was some confirmation after a few hours from Iran and after a few hours more from Israel. However, in the meantime, after 6 barrages hit Israel in the early morning hours, after Israel confirmed the ceasefire, another missile barrage has occurred on Israel. So this is the question, the pivotal moment, and we're going to discuss all of this and more when we're back.
I often say that if we can only do one thing well, what we need to do is to delight the customer. Our goal is that everything we do falls into the background and the customer has the experience of, wow, that was easy. And our challenge and what has made it most interesting along the way is to keep finding ways to deliver the personal connection and the personalized service in a virtual world. We consistently get feedback unsolicited from customers along the lines of, this is the best company that I've ever worked with. At the end of the day, it's the care that each member of the team takes that makes the entire experience what it is.
And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our diplomatic reporter, Lazar Berman. Hours after Iran attempted to strike a U.S. military base in Qatar, yes, that happened as well, U.S. President Donald Trump announced Monday night for him that Israel and Iran had agreed to a complete and total ceasefire that would bring about an end to the 12-day war. So in a Truth Social post that Trump published at 5:02 p.m. in Washington, which was 1:02 a.m. in Israel, Trump said that Israel and Iran would likely exchange final blows over the next 6 hours and that a deal would come into place on Tuesday. I'll read out the post now. Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war. And he congratulated both sides on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end the conflict that could have gone on for years. So the question now is, of course, is the conflict indeed over? Because just about half an hour before we started recording, of course, there was another missile barrage from Iran. And our defense minister, Israel Katz, has directed the IDF to retaliate. So what's going on, Lazar?
Yeah, so that, I don't know, we're going to have to make sense of that Iranian missile attack within the last hour. If they agree to a ceasefire and they feel like they've gotten their last licks in, they were able to hit an American base, or at least they say they were able to hit an American base, then why would they be firing again? It could be that there are factions that the control has kind of broken down. There could be a faction that hasn't gotten the proper updates. It's hard to understand what the logic is to fire, but we know that not only the defense minister, but other sources are saying that Iran will pay for doing that. So we're shifting into the post, quote unquote, ceasefire era. It doesn't mean that the ceasefire is totally over. It could be that we'll hit them back and we'll say, okay, if they're quiet again, then we're willing to do this. But let's not forget, there's a ceasefire in Lebanon, and we continue to strike there whenever we see a potential threat. The difference there is that Hezbollah is not firing back, and what it seems that Iran is determined to continue to show that it is firing back, and it has not been intimidated. So it really remains to be seen what is going to be of the ceasefire. But
Lazar, I think another big difference between Iran and Hezbollah, of course, is that Iran is a sovereign nation and Hezbollah is this alien terrorist organization inside a different sovereign nation that is working to also clamp down on Hezbollah and tells it not to retaliate when Israel fires, on weapons smuggling, et cetera, et cetera. But Iran, as you said, maybe there is some kind of breakdown in there. I mean, from all of our experience with ceasefires with, for example, Hamas in Gaza, after the ceasefire, there is usually another rocket or two that some faction is firing off. So do you really think that this is a potential possibility of what's happening in Iran?
Yeah, I think it is. And you also have the Iranian state TV denying that they fired at all. So I think it would be very curious if they agreed to a ceasefire, if they got their, they got their final licks in against the U.S. base, but they also fired a deadly strike on Beersheba and killed 4 people. So I'm not sure what firing 2 more missiles would show right here, but I think we're gonna have to wait and understand, who fired this and what was the reason if we ever find that out. But I think what we can say is that Israel is going to fire back. And then we'll see how that affects the ceasefire moving forward.
Let's talk about the, to me, strange rollout of the ceasefire. We had the Trump announcement, and then a couple hours later, the Iranian foreign minister not exactly confirming a ceasefire, but saying if Israel stops shooting, we'll stop shooting too. And then only several hours later did official Israel actually confirm there was a truce. So what do you see going on here?
Yeah, I think both sides don't want to make it seem like that they're the ones giving in, that they're eager for a ceasefire. At the same time, Iran wants to show Israel as the aggressor and say we had no problem. Israel started attacking us, so all we did was exercise our right to self-defense. That's what they're trying to show. But I think Iran does indeed want these. I'm sure Iran does indeed want these strikes to end, but it wants them to end when it looks like it's in a position of power. Anything that happens with Trump is kind of strange, right? So the way he writes it on Truth Social, and that he expects both sides to be respectful, and he congratulates both sides. It's very odd. He just was threatening the supreme leader and was bombing Iran, and then a couple of days later he's writing things like this. So it's always a little bit strange like him. There's reports that the ceasefire announcement even surprised some of his own officials. So the fact that it's kind of a bumpy rollout, I think, is not something that's unexpected. And it took a few hours. It took till after 9 a.m. this morning for the Prime Minister's office to say that they'd accepted the ceasefire and to claim that Israel had achieved all of its goals. I mean, that's the Israeli claim right now, that on the ballistic front and on the nuclear front, we'd achieved all of our goals. What Israel was saying last night was that we were very close to achieving our goals. So that's the claim. We're going to have to, again, wait before we evaluate how accurate those claims are.
Of course, the IDF spokesperson, Effie Deference, did say that the IDF struck another 100 sites in Iran overnight. So potentially that fills that gap between almost achieving and achieving. Who knows, right?
I would doubt it because, the focus was on Tehran. Tehran is not a center of the nuclear program. The nuclear program is spread out, and we know some of the key sites. There's also some of the hidden sites, I'm sure. But the sites that we had questions about, especially the Fordo site, and then there's the question of what happened to Iran's enriched uranium. And we haven't seen any evidence that there was, more meaningful strikes on the nuclear program in the last hours. You had J.D. Vance saying that he believes a lot of that enriched uranium is buried now under the earth and is not accessible anymore. But again, these are things that need to be verified, and we don't know. But it seems like Israel, at least, is acting like it has intelligence that it has achieved its goals on the ballistic front and on the nuclear front.
And indeed, our finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, lauded the mission. And this is, of course, prior to the most recent barrage from Iran. But he said that Israel had delivered a crushing victory. So how do you see the reactions from inside the coalition and domestically in general?
Again, this is going to change. It depends, what happens with the ceasefire. But it seems like, well, first of all, the coalition everyone was behind this mission, and everyone, you didn't hear any dissent from within the coalition, which is somewhat rare. We definitely don't hear that on Gaza. And I guess they had seen intelligence that makes them feel like that Israel had done its job, had done enough here. But the question again is going to be, how do we enforce it? And we've certainly been in kind of these unofficial or unilateral ceasefires against enemies, and then we end up not enforcing it because we didn't want to look like stopping was a failure or withdrawing was a failure or that we ended too early. But we are in a different era now after October 7th, and that we're willing to strike all over the place. And we have shown that there's nowhere that we're not willing to strike. We strike Syria all the time. We strike Hezbollah after a ceasefire. We even strike in Yemen. So we'll see how determined Israel is to continue hitting Iran. And then the question is, what is Iran going to do? And that will turn into a political issue, of course. Right now, Netanyahu is on somewhat of a high, but if this turns into a back and forth firing war that keeps the airport closed and keeps schools shut, this will indeed become a problem for Netanyahu, and he's going to have to decide how to deal with that. And one option could be to return to an intensive air campaign.
Okay, let's go to a short break.
With Operation Rising Lion in full force, the moment to act is now. Your investment sends a clear message. Israel is not alone. Go to israelbonds.com or scan the on-screen QR code to invest in Israel bonds now.
And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with Lazar Berman, our diplomatic reporter. Let's talk a little bit more about the hit on the Qatari base where the U.S. shares some kind of airfield with a couple other nations. And according to Qatar, Iran fired 19 missiles at the base and one hit. What are you hearing in terms of this particular strike? And do you think it actually was the reprisal that the U.S. was expecting?
Yeah, this seems to be something that all sides are eager to move on from. No casualties were reported. Trump himself, kind of mocked Iran for telling everyone ahead of time. Iran says that 6 missiles got through. America says that one they let through because it wasn't going to hit anything. So there's different versions on what this was, but this certainly seems to be something that was designed to send a message. And that's it. And then to move on from there.
Okay. And of course, that strike came after Israel struck several key assets, including the notorious Evin prison and the very symbolic Destroy Israel clock in the center of Tehran. So tell us a little bit more about what Israel actually did yesterday.
Yeah. So yesterday, it seemed like the focus was on some symbols like that clock, which said that it was counting down till 2040, which is when Khamenei said that Israel will cease to exist. And sites like the Evin prison, there was a strike on the front door, which is, of course, a prison where all sorts of opponents of the regime, political prisoners and the like, including Westerners, are being held, I'm sure, in terrible conditions. There was also a series of strikes on internal security forces, Basij and some other forces, including within the IRGC, which could have been interpreted to that we're trying to get the people to rise up and to try to strike at the very forces that kept protests down and that killed and beat protesters. Or it could just be symbolic that we're just trying to, at the end of the fight, to show that we also are supporting the Iranian people. What we can see right now is that it did not lead to any massive uprising, anyone taking to the street to demand the fall of the regime. So if that was indeed the goal, that part did not succeed.
So after the ceasefire was announced, the Hostages Families Forum came out with its own announcement demanding that this ceasefire with Iran be tied to Gaza. Is there any way to do that, to get the hostages out right now, that there is some kind of intervention of the U.S. president with Iran and potentially with one of Iran's proxies, Hamas?
I would say it's not likely. I mean, the way this affects it is that its last ally, Iran, is badly weakened and is limited into what it can do. But it's not like Iran was firing at Israel during the war because of things that related to Gaza. Anyway, it was related to striking Iranian generals. So it doesn't really change much in terms of Hamas's situation. Hamas feels like it's fighting for its life, and therefore it is clinging to the last asset it has, the hostages, and that continues to be the case. It could be that, part of this ceasefire was it will say something publicly to Hamas, or will send some other type of message that they have to give up. But I don't think that's necessarily something that we should count on. The IDF operation in Gaza continues. They control well over half the Gaza Strip, and that is. There's a logic there that could bring Hamas into a very different situation where it's willing to agree to things it wouldn't agree to in the past. There's also an option that Israel decides that it's done enough and it accepts all sorts of outside formulas for Hamas disarming or not being part of the ruling technocratic structure in Gaza. So there's a question not only what has changed amongst Hamas, but maybe something has changed amongst Israel as well. If we've hit the head of the octopus, in the awkward phrase, then maybe we'll say we've done enough, and now let's look toward taking advantage of the display of strength that we showed, and let's try to move ahead on normalization agreements. I think there's a faction that wants that. There's discussions about that in the PMO, but I don't think we're there yet.
Okay, Lazar, since you are a diplomatic reporter, let's just close out with what you're hearing from international players about this hopeful potential ceasefire with Iran right now.
And everyone wants this to end. They've been calling for, a return to stability, and that word that doesn't really mean much, but de-escalation and all those catchwords, those catchphrases that we always hear. I'm sure everyone would be happy to see this over. They're also happy, in terms of the West, that the nuclear program is in a very different situation than it is now. Iran is certainly weakened, and this didn't spread into some sort of major conflagration. So I think people are happy, and this will do good things for Israel, I think, in terms of their relationship with Europe.
In the meantime, of course, Israel is still basically shuttered. There are no schools, there are no large gatherings, and people are trying to make the best of it, staying as close to their shelters as possible, though I'm sure there are plenty who are hitting the beach already right now. So Lazar, thank you so much for joining me today. And listeners, please check out our live blog for the vastly quickly shifting news cycle that we have here. Lazar, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Please check out another episode tomorrow. This installment was produced by the Podwaves and video edited by Thomas Gersh. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow, shalom.